Hello, I'm Ian Buss and I'm from the Education Banking Consultancy. We're going to have a quick session today to explore where most fraud losses come from and how fraudsters try and take money from our schools, and identify a few top tips to help keep your school safe. Surprisingly, invoice fraud is still the most successful way a fraudster can take money from our schools. Twice as much money is lost to invoice fraud than any other type of fraud in schools. You do notice though that CEO fraud has increased, and that's up to 22% now. And the risks start with people. And actually it's not just the finance people. I'll ask you a quick question. Do all staff know how to keep one step ahead of fraudsters? What's an interesting figure is that over 90% of all losses start with some kind of phishing type attack. So every single member of staff with access to email should have fraud awareness training, not just the finance team. And by some kind of phishing attack, that covers the three main types. That's phishing, smishing and vishing. I suspect you've all heard of these. Phishing is the most common. It's the email that comes through and tells us that we need to click on a particular link. Text messages are getting a lot more common, and you'll see on the screen there an example of a text message I had literally a couple of days before writing this session. You'll notice though it actually says it's from HSBC. HSBC in the title there has been spoofed. It's obviously not from HSBC at all, but it's really quite easy for a fraudster to spoof the information on a text like that, or even a telephone number, so it appears that you're getting a call from a number that's actually your bank when it's not the bank at all. And the other type of social engineering would be vishing, where somebody rings you up purporting to be somebody from the bank or somebody or a police person or etc. And all of this has a common purpose. All of that type of social engineering is designed to trick you into doing something you wouldn't normally. It's to trick you into downloading some malware by clicking on a link, which will install onto your computer and give hackers access to it. It gives them the opportunity to research you and your school to make potential frauds easier to execute. It may be to steal your identity, to try and take out some kind of debt or loan in your name. At school, from a phishing attack, we run the real risk of having malware installed. And malware can do a multitude of things, including just capture the screens that you're viewing at and send them back to the hacker. They can watch what you're doing to capture your usernames and your passwords. It can hijack your web browser, so you may be thinking you're putting in your bank website, but the hacker is actually forwarding you to a copy of the bank website that they have created so that they can watch you input your passwords and usernames. And it also gives them access and control to your email. And this is where we're seeing more and more frauds. A growing threat is ransomware, and I don't want to underestimate the importance of this. The losses aren't significant at the moment, but the impact it can have on you running your school and getting your school back up to running order is huge. We've probably all seen the articles around various multi-academy trusts and schools that have had ransomware, and it can take them days, weeks or even months to get their data back online. We had an example recently of a couple of schools in Kent that had a ransomware attack and actually had to send all the children home because they did not have emergency contact details for them anymore. All their data was locked. The NCSC have really good guidance, which I would urge you to have a look at. But if you do one thing and one thing only, that would be to have an off-grid backup of all of your data. By off-grid, I mean a physical backup that's not attached to your network in any way, shape or form. To make it more difficult for hackers to put malware, and ransomware is just a form of malware, onto your computer, all of your passwords should be strong, and where you can, always use multi-factor authentication. And the software that you use should, when a patch is released, you should update it straight away, because most patches have got security flaws that have been fixed. So if we look at invoice fraud, we've all seen postal invoices coming from a supplier that we were expecting, just coming through the post in the hope that somebody will see it, pay it, and not recognise that a bank account detail has been changed. And exactly the same by way of emailed fake invoices coming from an email address that looks like the supplier but probably isn't quite. We've also seen CEO payment fraud, and actually schools are losing a lot of money to CEO payment fraud. And probably the biggest impact at the moment is compromised email invoices. I'm going to start by touching on CEO payment fraud. This would usually start with your email system being hacked through malware being installed through some phishing attack. And the emails are then monitored, and they're monitored by the hackers to see how the CEO converses with people, what kind of language they use, what kind of times of day they speak to people, and the kind of requests and work that they're doing. So when they can launch their attack and wait until the CEO is away at a conference or on holiday, they can send an email from the CEO's email account asking for some kind of payment to be made that looks plausible, but actually it's quite difficult to get hold of the CEO. And we're seeing more and more fraudsters and hackers using voice-changing technology. So if you had just received something from the CEO by email that you weren't quite sure about, but then you had a phone call from somebody and it sounded like the CEO just ringing up to confirm it, it might just encourage you to make that payment that you wouldn't have done otherwise. The only way to stop this happening is to ensure that under no circumstances are ad hoc payments made. Again, through some kind of phishing attack where malware has been installed, the school email system could be compromised, or one of your supplier's email systems might have been compromised. I've seen an example where a school email system was compromised and the hacker was stopping invoices that were going out to parents and changing the bank details on the invoices from the school's bank account to their bank account. And then every time the school was chasing the parents for payments, the hacker was just stopping those particular emails going. And this was only picked up when the school started calling the parents and saying, look, we've sent you an invoice on a number of occasions and it's not been paid. And the parents said, well, we paid it on the first one. This particular school had lost about £30,000 through their email system being compromised. Another way that we're seeing significant amounts of cash being lost is through the supplier's email system being compromised. We might be really comfortable that our email system and our IT and our security is really strong, but we don't know how strong our supplier's information technology security is. Traditionally, the supplier might have been hacked, had their email accounts compromised, and the supplier then sends you an email with an invoice that you're expecting, and the hacker intercepts that and changes the bank account number and sends it to the school. In days gone by, most schools would have paid that. Luckily, we're seeing more and more schools checking that the account number has not been changed, and if it has, ringing up on the number that they've got on file. So we're seeing this kind of attack and this kind of compromised email fraud still happening and still working to a degree. But hackers are starting to get frustrated with the fact that we're getting onto them. So they've improved their technique on this one. We've now seen quite recently an enhanced version of this email fraud where the hackers from the supplier's email will send the school an email address saying that they've upgraded their telephone system and their telephone numbers have changed. Can they update their school records? And because it's nothing financial, we're not sending any money, schools have been known to just send that on to the administration team, and the administration team update that record. Then, a few days later, when the supplier is due to send an invoice, the hacker intercepts it, changes the bank account details on that invoice and sends it to the school. The school gets it, they recognise that it's a new bank account number, and they ring the telephone number that they've got on file for the supplier. And this is the number the hacker had changed it to a few days beforehand. The hacker is obviously expecting the call, confirms that everything is in order and that they've changed their bank account, and the school pays the invoice. And then when the real invoice arrives or the supplier chases his payment, that's when the fraud is actually recognised. Far too late to recall the original. So the question is, when a supplier changes any of their details, whether it's a phone number, an address, a signatory, or their bank account details, what is your process? And is it as robust as a process for changing their bank account? So a couple of initial next steps. Make sure that all of your team that have access to external email get some kind of training. It might be worth showing them this video. Just check and review your invoice payment process, including the process to change any of your supplier details. And from a ransomware point of view, make sure you do very regular off-grid backups. So if you are attacked with ransomware, you can back up your system and get it working again. And always be wary of links in emails, because that is the majority of the way that a hacker will steal your personal information or install malware. There's some great resources available online to help people spot different types of attacks and to share information on more recent attacks. What I'd like to do is just show you a very quick video which gives you an idea of what can happen if somebody unsuspectingly clicks a link on an email and gives a hacker access to their system.
I'd like a loan, please.
If you're careless with your details, they could be used to steal your identity.
Yeah, of course. I have all the details right here.